Oh, we are rolling?
Yeah, we should do this before it gets too hot in here.
Okay. Calm yourself. Notes. All right, who wants to open this one? I forgot.
I will.
Okay.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to This Week in the Untitled Podcast.
You were so close to saying the wick, weren't you? Just going straight to it.
Straight to it. We can't do that because there's going to be an ad break before that.
Right now?
No.
Okay. You surprised me with ad breaks, and I'm like, mid-sentence. You're like, an ad break goes here. I'm like, okay.
Those of you who get the early version, who jump on as soon as it is published by using the notification button on YouTube, sometimes you don't see the ads because I forget to put them in. There's, it's the publishing process. There's a whole lot going on in there.
Yeah, life.
Yeah, it is upload, and then usually it's upload from the office and then go back to home and a bunch of stuff because the internet is so much better here.
Mm-hmm. So is the air conditioning, anyway.
As long as it's on.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's speed things up because we shut it off to record. So Let's talk about what are we doing? What did we do this week, essentially, / what are we doing?
So stuff that's happening is we are continuing to play Dungeons & Dragons versus Rick and Morty on Mondays. It may or may not end this week. It's we have made sure to have it go as long as you need to.
Just finish when you finish. It'll be fine. Well, and the campaign is a huge dungeon crawl, which means that you could go on forever.
Yeah,
ever.
I believe it's it would be like a 6-hour one shot.
That's a lot.
Yeah. Interesting thing too about Dungeons and Dragons versus Rick and Morty, and the way that Aaron is playing it, he is not in the module, really. He's not going. They haven't done the dungeon. Mm-hmm, They've converted the dungeon into a town, which is, I think, a lot more interesting.
Yeah. Well, and also too, he's a fan. So it makes it highly more interesting to just sit there and listen to the voices, you know, because it's very much like watching the show. So if you are a fan of the show, Aaron does an excellent job. Yeah,
actually, everyone on there does a really good job of embodying the characters playing other characters. It's the
I'm a person playing a person.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm a dude playing another dude.
Yeah.
Playing a dude.
Cool. What else happened?
What else is going on?
We rolled the dice this week and had one person at the table.
Oh, yes, we had somebody in the studio with us. It is not something that we're ready to do full time.
Yeah.
We are still concerned and doing everything as good as we can. Lots of cleaning involved. But we
as I turn the camera and there is just cables and stands.
So, but it is a good thing.
And cables all over.
So a part of one of the lights fell. So
it's over there actually. Anyway,
so two parts of two lights fell.
Can we get back to the point of the fact that Ezra came in and we played Hyper Games?
Houston, we have it all.
Yep, that we talked about on Kickstarter last week. We actually got to demo it because a lot of the demos are in German and a lot of the instructions are in German or in English, but not fully. It's not a full demo, if you will.
Right.
So we were one of the few people that actually got a copy of it sent to the U.S. and in fact, in the conversation with Ezra, he actually had all the copies sent to him. So we got this one first before he even shipped the rest of the copies to everybody else who's going to review it. So we got top priority.
Yeah. And one of the things that we don't really do here a lot are review games, because that is it's a skill. Whereas playing games and messing up and having fun is not a skill.
Yeah, no, actually, it's par for the course. I highly urge everyone that if they want to see Thomas constantly mess up a game, watch Houston, We Have a Dolphin.
I didn't break any rules.
No, you didn't. You just played it epically wrong. Spoiler alert, was it during the initial playthrough?
Yeah.
So we tried it once just to figure out the mechanics and sort of ask questions and figure things out. And as you've seen, on last week's, obviously the dolphin is the villain. Somebody was the dolphin and somebody decided to make the dolphin captain right away and not keep it a secret. He's like, oh, I'm gonna be a captain. It says, welcome, Captain Dolphin. We're like, now what?
Yeah. If you are the dolphin, don't become a captain if you can avoid it.
Yeah.
Which you can with strategy.
By using your brain.
Strategy. Anyway, so that happened. That is out there right now. If you click this link right up over here.
So not even probably right.
It will take you to our playthrough of Houston, We Have a Dolphin.
And what was it? Friday? Monday. So
Saturday.
Shut up. Could just name the rest of the days of the week. Everything's
What
fine.
happened? Tell me what happened.
So this is my life in a nutshell. I get emails. I just get random emails. Sometimes I get phone calls. Really condensed version is Thomas used to go to NAB back when NAB was a thing in Vegas. And I would get emails from people saying, hey, thanks, Amy, for purchasing this thing. And it would be like $1,000 or $1,500 or $700. I would just get an email. I'd be sitting at my desk typing away, and all of a sudden I'd see, bang, thanks, Amy, for purchasing this $1,000 item. I'd be like, what the fuck just happened?
I don't know if I like where this conversation is going.
What do you mean? This isn't a conversation. This is me just having therapy moment. So this is actually, instead of the QNC update, this is therapy. You bought a slider or something.
Yeah, like 8 years ago at NAB.
But this is par for the course. So this is exactly how everything happens in my life, is that I get an email with money that Thomas has spent, updating me that he has spent money. And so I used to get extremely concerned when I would see these emails saying, hey, Amy, thanks. Because again, it's my name on the credit card, that it would be like, hey, or my name on the account that would say, hey, Amy, thanks for this purchase. I would freak out and be like, oh my God, somebody's got the credit card. Something has happened. After I don't know how many years now, I just know that you're just buying stuff. And that's the way it goes.
Except for that did happen because our credit card number was stolen and somebody used it to purchase some random
But did I call you freaked out?
You texted and said, hey, is this something you bought? And I said, no, it's probably fraud.
Exactly. As opposed to the other way around where early on, never mind. Anyway,
what is the point of this?
The point is, Friday I got an email saying, hey, Amy, thanks for purchasing Gloomhaven, Jaws of the Lion. I was like, yeah, okay, cool. So obviously that's going to show up. And I was pleasantly surprised to find out that it was Thursday, because after you told me the drama of it's out of stock, it's in stock,
you
whatever.
Can't find it, yeah. Okay. So Jaws of the Lion, Gloomhaven, we're going to play it.
And I've been told by unknown sources that it's not as miserable as the original. Well, for all of the Gloomhaven fans out there, we obviously are not going to ever play games together because we just don't enjoy the same game. So I've heard that not only is there the foldable book that I saw on the email that said, congratulations, you've purchased this, it'll arrive on Thursday, but also I was told that there is sort of a watered down version of the rules, and as you go along, rules are added. So it's not like you have to memorize this 60-page book or spend half of your gameplay looking up rules, which
I don't know. Let's wait until we get it to really find out if we need to read all 88 pages of the rule book.
If we really need to read any of the rules, I agree. But yeah, back to Houston, We Have a Dolphin. 4 pages of rules. Thumbs up. Anyway.
How's that slider working out for you?
I don't know. How is it? I mean, I enjoyed it. We shot Mage Haven on it. It was a really good value. Anyway. It
still rents out to today. So if you are in the local to the Bay Area, if you needed a 4-foot slider, it's for rent.
Yeah, please offset that freaked out email. Hey, your husband just spent $1,200 in Vegas. Thanks.
Hey, I spent $1,200 in Vegas on something useful. I'll just leave that out there.
Who says wine isn't useful?
All right. I think we need a palate cleanser. I think we need to take a break, an ad break, if you will, and then come back for this weekend Kickstarter. You
were supposed to put it in when I said right now.
Okay, and we are back after that. After that ad break, if you use an ad blocker, you do not see an ad break. And we did not earn any pennies for it.
And when we say pennies, we actually mean
literal
parts of pennies.
Parts of pennies.
Yeah, not actual pennies.
Digital parts of pennies.
Okay, so
we're in This Week in Kickstarter.
And this week is going to be different because we're going to talk about things that are coming up, not things that are actually, as our usual MO, 5 days to being finished, which is...
Yes. If this goes out when we think it will go out, you cannot purchase either of these 2 Kickstarters we're going to talk about.
No, you could actually purchase one.
Oh, you can?
Yeah, because one of them will launch in 2 days from the record day, which means that it will be brand new to Kickstarter, which is kind of why I almost like this, because now we can be like, hey, remember we mentioned this thing? Or, hey, guess what? We're actually on time with something. So for once, by going early, we've made it a deadline on time.
Are you going to edit this tonight?
Nope.
Okay, then. So let's jump into... Let's jump into game number 1, which is the one that's coming out sooner.
No. What?
Okay, game number 1.
I don't know what you're saying anymore.
The Librarians.
It's not sooner.
It is. It's not. Okay, game number 1. I should have said let's start with game number 2, the one that's coming out sooner.
How about just start with anything?
The Librarians.
One of the games will be fine.
Is that TNT? Is it?
I think it is. I think it's Turner Network, whatever.
Yeah.
Feels right.
Noah Wiley.
How about
everyone's favorite doctor?
Watch.
That's a staring off
the
into
Librarian movies, Wikipedia, blah 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 blah.
Anyway,
continue to talk about the show.
So,
I made you watch it. I actually enjoyed it.
So it's honestly, we're less excited about this being The Librarians than we are about this being designed by Brett Schofield, our very own a weighted cane wielding maniac, drug running drug addict. This is all in Call of Cthulhu. So Brett,
I don't think he ran drugs. I mean, he did have a pinky ring and a cape, which was amazing.
So Brett was in our home game, our home Cthulhu game with Ezra, Nick, a number of other people, Amy and I, and we played Horror on the Orient Express.
Which I still think is Murder on the Orient Express, but whatever.
Yes, all the way up until...
Because somebody murdered me.
Nick betrayed us, and then the game was just over. It's like, your whole mission this entire time? Yeah, Nick's character decided just to give the bad guy what he wanted, and... Hey, we're done with this game.
Well, it is a thing you can do.
Anyway, he and Nick's Brett and Nick got into a lot of fun with tranquilizers to keep dogs away. I think they were both afraid of dogs for some reason.
I don't know. Well, I mean, I wouldn't. Anyway, this isn't about Cthulhu. This is about the fact that
our friend Brett
is the designer.
Designed a card game, and this is a cooperative card game. So it has aspects that are somewhat similar to the Arkham Horror. Things are a little bit different. Things that are like the Warhammer RPG. Is that what it is?
I don't know.
So in this card game, you have a deck of cards, which is an adventure. And it's each deck is, I believe, standalone, and you go through that adventure. And you are going cooperative, and you play one librarian. And you have a deck that represents your skills and abilities and knowledge. And you together play through an adventure with the card deck. It's very vague right now. They're not saying a lot. They have Brett sent us a little bit more information, but it's still it feels like they're still being very vague about some of the actual mechanics.
Yeah. So just to read some of the information that he sent us in a chat. You're playing through a scenario called an adventure, which contains a unique set of cards, kind of like Arkham Horror, but no cards are shared between the adventures. These cards dictate what you are trying to achieve, as well as what your antagonists are trying to achieve as well. Finally, the adventure cards put roadblocks in your way. It behooves you to defeat them, but it won't necessarily help you win. I'm suspecting it'll probably slow you down and make things more complicated more than anything else. And like Thomas said, you do control a character from the television show or little movie, I think they're called movie miniseries or whatever, that, were on television. And that you have an accompanying deck of cards that represents your skills, your knowledge, and your capabilities. And then your characters take actions, and you resolve those actions by rolling a pool of dice. So that's, I think, the interesting piece here is that unlike Arkham Horror, you get a pool of dice in order to determine if you do succeed or fail. Right. And
a lot of people don't like the randomness of dice rolls. So in this, there is a mechanic where you can use your cards to offset any really bad rolls. So if you, so you're less reliant on just pure luck. And there's luck, but then you have the ability to strategize and say, I think it's worth it trying to, do something right now rather than later.
Or let the dice lie where they are. So I'm just excited to actually know somebody for quite some time. I mean, how long have we known Brett and played games with him?
10 years probably.
Yep. Who's actually developed a game, and this game will launch when he said Q1.
Q3. which, could be today.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Q3,
I live in a world
yes.
where my quarters are weird. So, like, to me, Q1 starts in August. Never mind.
You're in Q1 2025 already.
Yes,
with your
I
company.
live in the
It's
future.
Weird.
Anyway, so it'll launch Q3. So it'll launch later this year.
The Kickstarter will launch.
Yep, exactly. And so we'll have Brett on to talk a little bit about the game, and he'll give us a preview of the game, which, again, super excited. That friends of ours make games for a living and that they're launching them on Kickstarter and that they have big names, big TV names like, the Librarians. So that's kind of epic and fun.
So it's kind of funny. He posted, hey, this thing that I've been working on for a number of years is coming out. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. You made a game. And it wasn't until a couple days later that I actually opened up the link that he posted to see that I'm like, oh man, this is it's the Librarians. That's a big property. That is very cool. And we will talk to Brett and maybe even the publisher of the game and maybe discuss the IP and how that happens. Because later in the show today, we're going to be talking to Brandon Raasch of Bard Games, who does a lot of game mechanics, or, he finds a designer that has a game, and then he finds an IP that fits with the game. And comes out with games like Fickle and The Lost Worlds of Josh Kirby. So we're going to talk to him later on in the show.
Yep. And so that's also why we wanted to kind of introduce the Librarians, because it does that as well, where you're looking at an IP that, Brett probably didn't have access to, and then marrying it with some game mechanics that, I'm sure him and his team have developed. So
yeah,
should be exciting.
The graphics cards look really cool. I am looking forward to checking that out.
Yep. And the video has some cutscenes from the actual show itself, which is cool.
Yeah, video looks pretty cool.
Yep, so they definitely have support from the actual property IP.
Cool. What else is going on? You were talking about another RPG.
Okay, so Thomas is arguing with me on this one.
Am I?
Okay, the name of it is Jiangshi, Blood in the Banquet Hall.
Okay.
How could you not?
Not what?
Want to play this?
Okay.
I mean, Blood in the Banquet Hall, that says it all right there. Okay.
Sounds like a typical marriage ceremony, if you ask me.
Blood in the Banquet Hall?
Yeah.
Highly possible. So essentially, Jiangshi is flying zombies, and this is an RPG, and you are a family of Chinese immigrants running a restaurant by day and dealing with the hauntings of Jiangshi by night. Jiangshi. My pronunciation in English is terrible, much less any other language would be horrible. And this was done by Banana Chan and another gentleman that I did not write his name down and now forget. But essentially, the RPG is launching in July, what's today? July 14th. So it's launched. Thanks.
When you said it's July, I was like, it's not July.
That's okay. We were talking about it this morning. I was like, March, like tomorrow.
It's still going out in March. Yeah, my concept of months is like, when this is all over, it's like, oh no, it's March. We're going to redo this. We're going to redo it. It's a redo.
So really, okay, never mind. I was thinking about that the other day.
Well, the downside of that comment is that it might be like, hey, everybody, it's March. We get to redo it. It's March 2021.
It is. I guarantee you it is. I'm just saying that if there's a sports bet for when we get out of this, I don't have money putting it on March 2021.
Wow.
Anyway.
It's coming out in 3 days.
So
2 days.
It takes place in Calgary, Canada, and it takes place in the 1920s, right around, the Chinese Immigration Act. And so there are some adult themes in here dealing with immigration, racism, things of that nature. But then there's also kind of like the Cthulhu-y aspect of it. So I was watching a playthrough, and it really just comes down to, the tone of the characters. So you are a family, and you have to determine what your family dynamics are. And it is an entirely new game system based on D8s. And so you can, obviously play with any, family relationships that you want to. There is the kick-ass grandma.
Okay.
She's somewhat superstitious.
So pre-generated characters.
So in the playtest or in the playthroughs that I saw, there are pre-generated characters.
Okay.
And so I'd be interested to find out in a couple days to check back and just, maybe do an update in next week's just to see, just because this is the playthrough, just kind of like Rick and Morty. It's like, okay, so there are pre-generated characters, but then the question is, can you alter this to make it fit what your players want to do?
Right.
So in the playtest, it's like a son, grandma, and then a couple, and they run the the Chinese restaurant. And then your NPCs kind of come and go. And then they, not only have to deal with the dealings of, running a restaurant during the day. Obviously, some of it is just, what do you do? I'm the chef, who really cooks. Well, the wife actually cooks, but the husband thinks he's the chef kind of thing. So there are the dealings of, running the restaurant, but then you also get to, use and rely on that supernatural piece. That integrates into fighting zombies, which again, for me is really kind of fun because it feels very Cthulhu-ish. And I could see it being easily adapted to being either run into a Cthulhu campaign or vice versa. And obviously everything I do is pulp, so.
So there's going to be lots of stabbings of Jiangshi.
Possibly. I mean, there was already.
Punch a ghost?
You could punch a ghost. You could also cleave one. It's a zombie. It's not a ghost.
Oh. But it flies?
Well, it jumps.
So, okay.
I don't know.
What are the stats of these zombies? I need
know.
A stat block.
I don't know.
You
can
probably
find out in probably a
2
month.
days.
Yeah.
Yes. In a month. In 2 days, you'll probably find out a lot more when it hits Kickstarter. There is that playthrough with with Banana Chan as the DM.
Yep.
The GM. The D. I forget what specifically they called the game master.
It's like something moderator.
Yes. Anyway,
should have taken notes. Should have taken better notes.
Should have taken notes.
Oh well.
But anyway, so that is out. Will probably be out as we talk as this Kickstarter goes out, and there will be a link to that playthrough right up here. It is on YouTube, so you can kind of take a look at it, and watch that because it's it's out already, so you might as well take a look because it seems like a very cool stream. The recording.
Hopping vampire or zombie. So when you say ghost, it's not really it's corporeal, so you could punch it technically.
Well, here's the problem: if a zombie and a vampire are two very different things.
Maybe.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, so that's cool. Check that out.
I'll tell you offline about zombies and vampires.
Okay. Is that going to wrap it up? Is that the end of this week in Kickstarter?
We have to. So Sen Lim is the other developer on this. Sorry, I had to find those little scribblings that
Thank you.
I put it. I literally wrote it on a piece of paper and then put the grocery list on the other side of it and then threw it out.
It was weird. Why?
Because I was like, Immigration Act of 1920 in Calgary. No, notes on that, and then a list of vegetables.
It's like we need red peppers, green peppers, jumping zombies. I'm like, what? I don't get this.
It's completely within motif. It's like you're running a restaurant and killing jumping zombies. So I'm just saying. It's anyway.
Chapter 1, going to the farmer's market. And then imagine real life, right, where you have to continue to make a living, continue to run a business, and then you never know if there's a vampire out or a zombie or a jumping zombie.
It's exhausting. One job's enough.
So if there are zombies, I think we need to just be like, nobody has to work anymore. Zombies.
Maybe the zombies should work.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the Zombie Liberation Front probably would not be into that.
Who's going to represent that? Never mind. Okay, again, it's going to be a whole other side topic about representation in Congress. Never mind.
No, if you were a zombie.
Never mind. What? I mean, do you get half representation because technically you're not alive anymore? So you're not a living person. We'd have to redefine what a person is.
This is a rabbit hole I don't think that you or I should be doing.
Okay.
Zombies are, they can talk for themselves.
Can they? What are they going to say? Exactly. Okay, so let's, I forgot, you introduced Brandon?
Yeah, I did.
So guess what? We're going to talk to Brandon next.
After this ad break. The new way that we kick this off is a lot more informal. So welcome, Brandon.
Talking. Thank you.
Yeah, let's just start talking. How's it going, man?
Great. Obviously, 2020 has been a bizarre year for everyone in gaming and just about every industry. So despite that, though, doing well and so excited to see you two again.
Yeah, hi. I like the fact that you pressed your shirt as well.
Clearly, the camera adds 15 wrinkles. So.
No, I was very dressed up for for a meeting, for a home meeting.
Yeah. Well,
I think it's the new world, right? We all gotta get ready.
The last time we saw each other in person was February.
That's right, DunderCon.
I barely remember that.
That was still a totally normal time period in America, anyway.
We were innocent then, weren't we? As we all sat around the game table and had a great time playing Josh Kirby and doing the promotion, and but it's a interesting kickoff to I think how everyone's doing is different than it used to be. And as we've turned to virtual tools and trying to figure out how we're going to engage with audiences, and I mean, and we're really blessed though, because if you're in the Kickstarter lane, luckily you are already kind of focused on your virtual audience. But certainly what's hurting for a lot of gamers is not being able to go to conventions.
Right. Well, and publishing companies, that's, a lot of people, that is where they make all their money. We talked to TJ from Master Monk, and conventions is where they made their money. A lot of people, conventions it's a marketing expense that they hope to break even on. That was how he was, generating.
I do think the industry is going to shift. And if I really step back and compare it to other retail companies, and really retail the last 20 years, if you look back like 10, 15 years ago, brick and mortar retail managers were convinced that you can't sell anything on the internet. Nobody's ever going to take it serious. People are always going to come in and want to touch things. And this was before Amazon. Now we look at, fast forward, how much do you really start in a store anymore when you're making a meaningful purchase, when you're a hobbyist, right? It all begins online. And I think the board game industry is just a little behind, right? So it's specialty industry. It's, it's a smaller margin, smaller content. So it makes sense, but it's still retail, right? You're still selling stuff, you're making product. And I do believe that the pandemic globally has suddenly pushed everyone to figure out, well, can it be done virtually? Even look at your friendly local game stores that are delivering curbside and hosting virtual events, and Tabletop Simulator and Tabletopia. There's all this evidence that, this is the year, and we're seeing it. I think other publishers are really racing to have a relevant e-commerce experience and get ready to embrace a reality where conventions really may not be the linchpin that it used to be, because we just don't know, right? Whether it's coming back, and what will they be like, and will people come to them, right? And certainly depending on what state you're in, there's, sales are all over the place and people are out enjoying themselves. But, as a business owner or operator, you also have some responsibility to, ideally sell your product safely.
Sorry, how does that work with the virtual tabletop? I mean, is it, are you producing content that then sells through them, or are people scanning the cards, or like what happens on those?
There's lots of routes. So I'll talk about we're in the research phase of two of the most popular platforms, which is Tabletopia and Tabletop Simulator. And to relate it to IP a little bit, there's a difference between the two. I would say that the customers, for one, are very used to knockoffs, and they don't do a very great job of protecting the IP, which is fine if you're a prototype or homegrown. And some will argue, even if they knock off your product, people are learning about your game, they may buy it later. Okay. But if you actually have an IP and an obligation to defend the imagery or the story or the characters, then you really can't have that. Where the other, I think, so in Tabletop Simulator, you are basically partnering with their company. They actually build the for sale version of your game. And there's a long wait right now because just about everybody is trying to get that done. And then it's basically like a royalty share. They are providing the platform and doing the legwork to build it. And then it's like a 50-50 split, roughly. Where Tabletopia, you are doing the development and you can make a for sale version. And they can get involved and offer you services. So they're kind of two different paths of the same solution, which is, a online version to play of lots of games that are really migrating over there. And, I think one thing that is a nice aha that's come out of all this, if you have the assets anyway, after you've made the physical game, you have all the virtual content because, to your question, cards are roughly the same shape regardless, poker size card, right? Most of the assets and virtual assets can be handled pretty quickly to make another experience. And it's a lot less coding than it probably was 10 years ago. It's almost WYSIWYG at this point. So, so there's just the barrier of entry is a lot lower to make virtual versions of your games. And we're just seeing, and what I think is neat about that is suddenly people are discovering gaming because they're stuck at home. And so there's this, I really do think there's going to be this interesting, I don't know if it's a tectonic shift, but it's certainly enough of a quake that in the board game space, every publisher, distributor, everyone is rethinking their model. And we're certainly kind of riding that same wave.
I mean, I think that there's still going to be, there obviously is still that in-person experience where I think we were talking to Rob Davio and he was, Tabletop Simulator has animations and stuff. And he's like, yeah, sometimes that gets in the way of just playtesting this game to kind of figure out, why is it slow? Is it the animations? Is it, the fact that you can't just look at if you've got like 5 cards set out, you can't look over and see them. You have to take control, move the board and everything.
Yeah, I agree. I've actually done, I'd say in the last 2 months, I've been involved in 4 or 5 prototype tabletop simulator, Tabletopia. And, there's some new skills to learn, like how the buttons work and how to shuffle cards. And it's very easy. And it's kind of fun to watch people fumble as they're trying to pick up one card and they accidentally reveal the whole deck. And, like.
Somebody I know who does that in real life right here. He did that yesterday. We played we played an actual like prototype that was sent to Ezra from Hyber, and he's just like, whoops, I just revealed like the big bad guy to everybody, sorry. And it was his fingers that did it. It wasn't like, keyboards or anything.
Oh, well, fair. Then maybe the virtual to to real world isn't as far divided as we thought.
I've seen Amy throw a deck of cards like, oh, I dropped all those cards. Well,
fairness, the Tabletop Simulator Rage Quit where you flip the table is just awesome. So, there really is some give and take, and as opposed to good or bad or right or wrong or what's better or worse, I think it's just this shift that is happening, and it's being almost accelerated because we're at home, because publishers are hurting and trying to figure out how to re-engage, right? So and that's why I was comparing it to retail and Amazon of even 10 years ago. 10-15 years ago, if you were a retail store, you didn't see it coming. You weren't getting, very few were getting ready. And now I think we're kind of thrust into this new world where you didn't see it coming if you're a local small publisher. And the ones that get there, the ones that have a good e-commerce experience that can deal with the logistics of, virtual and physical, right, will be ready. And it's a tall order in the middle of a pandemic and all this uncertainty.
Where shipping becomes issues, and I can't get the fundamentals sometimes sent to my door on time. So how do I expect a small publisher to do so?
We're short of toilet paper and pandemic legacy.
Yeah, this is true. Yeah.
Got plenty pandemic. Yeah.
So you mentioned that you had looked at you were working on 4 different tabletop simulator things. Like what's kind of in the cooker right now? Like what are you looking at? What are you developing? For board games, what are you guys developing right now?
Actually crowdfunded The Lost Worlds of Josh Kirby.
Yep.
Back in March, February, March.
It feels insane, like 10 years ago.
It literally felt like a year ago, I feel like. Because now that you talk about it, it's like I remember the experience of going through and play testing some things and actually giving real feedback. And then now all of a sudden we're talking about the fact that it's funded, it's out there, and you're already looking at other development. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So we crowdfunded campaign closed in March, right before the pandemic became a reality. So that was just serendipity. And we're in the middle of the production cycle for that. It also includes the mission log, which is a puzzle and coloring book, 36 pages of fun. Oh, it's beautiful. I will make sure to send you a PDF so you can get a preview. Yes. And I will tell you the puzzles get increasingly harder. So towards the end, I shared one with friends at work, and it was great listening to them argue over lunch because it's a puzzle, right? So there's a correct answer. And it's 190. No, it's 120. It's 175. Just, like for an hour. I finally had to give them the answer so they'd stop arguing. So we're happy with that. And then what's next is we have soft announced, and we'll do the media announcement shortly. Tater Freighter.
Okay.
Okay.
Is this related to a tater tot? Because God, I love a tater tot.
Shipping. It's the shipping magnets from Tater Tots.
Yes. So Tater Freighter is a really silly 7-minute card game where you are trying to collect taters, right, and other bizarre foods like jam taters, and shrimp. Yeah, I'll see if I can throw some cards, but here's the Tater Freighter vehicle card. And it has some really wonderfully fun graphics. Hard to see, I'm sure, on the camera, but
it looks good.
Yeah, and here's the shrimp blimp, and I showed you the grain plane, and everything is a fun. Here's the jam tram, and everything has a fun little rhyme scheme. In fact, we can teach the entire rules with a poem. And what the goal of the game is 7 minutes of 3 to 7 players, where you are trying to collect the most food by playing your vehicles and kind of trying to equally distribute the food. And it's based on a lot of like that prisoner's dilemma. I know what you know what I know. We both know the same thing, but what are you going to play? Yeah. And super fun. It's also one that we think we could fulfill this year. And it actually is a reaction to, we had this shift on not being able to go to conventions, not being able to sign up wholesale, which was our plan this year for some of the current product. We decided to, instead of a big Kickstarter, we do a smaller one, smaller SKUs, easier to produce. Because, among other things, I think people's wallets are a little tighter this year than past years. And so Tater Freighter we're working on. We're still in development for Battlefield Earth, which is, so we've been working with Galaxy Press for some time, and we actually have a preliminary prototype that takes from the graphic novelization that they're working on for the sci-fi story, and that will likely be next year. It was planned for this year on the heels of Josh Kirby. We wanted another space themed game, but just decided that in light of the burden of everything that's going on, we kind of made a shift there. And those are probably the two. And then, I guess the third one is the partnership with Dynamite Comics, Sherlock Holmes, Vanishing Man.
Right.
That is the Kickstarter will actually be run by Dynamite, and we are the publishing house. So we've worked on the game. We've handed over all the files. We're really close. So I'm hoping we'll see the Kickstarter this year. Their goal was summer. And like everyone, we all set out to have plans this year, and then we've been responding to 2020. So those are, So I'd say those are the three, upcoming: Tater Freighter, Sherlock Holmes, Battlefield Earth.
So for our viewers, kind of explain, because I'm kind of guessing here, because you're working with Battlefield Earth and then Sherlock. Those are IPs that exist. Kind of talk about the difference between something a little more homegrown that you guys take from beginning to end versus working with somebody, a big company that has a huge IP like Battlefield Earth or something like Josh Kirby, or what I mean, like,
or even finding a game and then finding an IP and making something that's greater than the sum of its parts. I mean, I think because that seems to be, from what I can tell, what you're known for.
Yeah, and I'll actually start with Fickle. I think you've covered another Fickle one before, but just as another example of now a completed game with an IP. And this is so Fickle. I'll start here. Bard Games, we set out to not only make fun games, but we want to work on unique IPs. And, when I say unique IP, there's lots of great IPs, but they're very expensive and they're heavily used. So think like the Marvel, the MCU, right? Or Star Wars, for a lot of reasons, we're not gonna be able to compete with Fantasy Flight. The entry cost for a Marvel Disney product, you're talking $50,000 to $100,000 just to play, with min guarantees and volumes. And if you're large enough, and, don't get me wrong, you put enough Spider-Mans on things, you're probably gonna do all right. But in fact, as proof, I don't know if you've seen this one, but I love this game because this is not ours. But I'm always happy to point out an IP as a great example of how to exploit an IP. And I'll talk a little bit more about Hail Hydra. But this is a Walmart by this is by Spin Master. but it's a marble. It's gorgeous and dark. You can't ignore it on the shelf. It kind of feels evil, right? And great art. But I wanted to show other IPs really kind of as to kind of set this idea that, you know, IP is a great way to introduce theme and art, and more importantly, activate an audience who ideally already exists. You know, a lot of the value of an IP is the followership that's already built into it. So one of the, you know, back to my statement, you know, when we talk about a unique IP, you know, Amy Brown is a great example. She has a huge social media following, primarily for her, you know, fairy themed illustrations, but has never had a board game. So for us, it was an opportunity to take an existing IP, talk to an audience that we think would be really excited, and then design a game with them in mind, right? So we knew it couldn't be a crunchy Euro and, you know, 6-hour setup. It needed to be something that's a little bit, you know, kind of think family casual, you know, filler if you're an alpha gamer. But we knew that knowing who the audience was a big piece of us working with the IP owner and with Amy Brown. So one of the real advantages is it's great when you get to work with the IP team, because they have their own marketing, they have their own audience, and you know that really made our Kickstarter for Fickle quite successful.
How did you kind of find Amy? Like, how did you find Amy Brown? You know what I mean? So like, and then also kind of compare that to Josh Kirby and Lost Worlds, you know, because again, one is space, one is fairies. You know, was the
little Josh Kirby here just to show off some art. You know, Josh Kirby's a little different because in this case, Josh Kirby is the name of the artist. We also kind of homaged him in the name of the board game. Josh Kirby passed away in the 2000s. So we're working with the estate of Josh Kirby, in this case, niece. So, you know, finding an IP is definitely a networking skill, and there's a little bit of luck, a little bit of serendipity, and a little bit out of pocket expense to really network and go to the right shows. So in our case, the Lost Worlds of Josh Kirby started at Alien Con, and I went and just talked to the estate, the family, about the beautiful art. And literally, you know, I think one of the things that's fun about IP, so I think movies, you know, like you get really excited when you see something or you connect to a great theme, and Josh Kirby's art was just so immersive. The space opera sci-fi of the 70s, 60s through 80s, right? Which is, you know, kind of my formative sci-fi years, just spoke to me. And so we hit it off, and, you know, and it's taken some years, because I also say that IP development is not as fast as creating your own art, because you're working, it's a business partnership, right? You're working with a company or a private owner who has some say and may even have restrictions on how you use their art, their illustration, the game, the name, that kind of stuff.
When you approach them, you know, because I understand IP as far as like for me in movies, because, you know, we have a film background. So usually what you do is that you kind of option it. Is that kind of the same concept where you go with them to a pitch and just say, here's my formal pitch, I'd like to option it for development for 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years? Like, how is that first process after you talk to them and say, yeah, we're interested, here's my lawyer, then what happens?
To begin with that optioning and like the here's my lawyer round, you know, once you're clear on what it is you're asking for, like how many art assets do you need? Are you going to use the name? What is your market? Are you trying to do global? Are you trying to do US? What is your category? Like a big one for us is we want to do board games and accessories and related geek products. Because like for Fickle, for example, we did card sleeves, right? Card sleeves is another SKU, right? It's another product. So having some semblance of like play mats or figurals is a great one, because when you start, depending on the size of the IP and the experience of the brand manager, if you're dealing with a, you know, kind of professional outfit, part of your negotiation can be which categories or kinds of products are you going to make. And that's a big one, because I think a lot of times people overlook, I'm making a board game, but I didn't think about merchandise. I didn't think about how much marketing support or content am I asking for. And the reason you do all that work is what you're trying to really do is value and evaluate, well, what can you afford? What are you willing to pay? Because a lot of the brands are going to either require a minimum or an upfront, as well as a percentage in the form of a royalty. And, and maybe the last piece is a little bit of homework on their marketing pool, right? So Josh Kirby was interesting because, it was kind of, I'll say a defunct IP, because there wasn't an active followership, but the family was actively promoting it. So we speculated that as long as they kept doing what they were doing, social media, other merchandise and products, the Josh Kirby's most famous for the covers of Discworld. So their connection with Sir Terry Pratchett and the Discworld books, is a big piece of kind of their marketing cycle. So they do a lot of products around that. The trick of it all is kind of getting clear what are you asking for of the IP, so that you can prepare for, to your point, eventually it has to get to a legal document, because IPs are complex enough. You have to deal with things with like, what countries are you selling in? What is your rights and responsibilities if you edit the work? And Disney Marvel, one of the reasons I grabbed this is a great example. I'm sure to use the Hydra logo, right, is a controlled. Disney had to sign off on this 10 different ways to Sunday, right, before this game was able to move forward. With a smaller, more intimate IP, ideally you're dealing with less layers of management, bureaucracy, artists. But at some level, in every IP deal, you're trying to identify what are you permitted to do, right? How much are you allowed to market it? And what is your duty to defend? I think that's a big one I mentioned earlier. If we take Amy Brown art, put it out on the internet for marketing purposes, and then people just start free downloading it, right? Because we didn't watermark it or we didn't change resolution, then we have a responsibility there. And that's literally, where I think a successful IP negotiation has to know that stuff, because you have to solve for those things. That's what I'll call like that's the kind of the math side of the discussion. The best IP deals that we've had so far include this emotional connection, right? Because to get everything through the lawyer and the cost, and both sides got to believe in what you're doing and what you're making. And I imagine film is very very similar, right? There's all this things you have to do, but if people believe in the project, then they'll take risks. Yeah, they'll find ways to make it work. And I'll tell you that IPs, because of all of that work, that preamble means that there's a lot of IPs that you won't get unless you just are foolish and spend your money heavily. If you're loaded, then, sometimes people tell me, oh, I got such and such an IP. And I say, that's not hard. It's how much did you pay for it? That's the hard part. Because, anybody will sell you their IP for a silly amount of money, but can you make money off the products you're going to make, right? Whatever you're doing. So when I last calculated my batting average, we had signed, I want to say 6-7 IPs, third party legally owned, and 27 pitches or attempts. Okay. So it was about 20%, right? So and there's a lot of work in each one of those. I'll tell you, it's not one or two calls. You have to really do some homework and all that preamble work, because generally where it starts to get difficult and might fall apart is those agreements and those financial considerations, because board games are also a tight margin. And when we started, my business partner Eric Kearney and I, when we started board games, we had gotten some advice that says, whatever you do, don't do IPs. It's just it just doesn't work, right, in board games. And and if you know me enough to know that, well, that's just a dare at that point. Like so I bit that hook. But it does mean, what I got from that is you have to be really smart and kind of unique, back to the unique IPs, because there is stuff out there that, and the good news is board games is very permissive, with the kinds of story. Heck, but rutabaga, cats, chilies, just about anything, right, is a board game topic now.
So when you're looking for those IPs, like in your creative process, because I suppose there is some creativity when you're like, I'm at Alien Con, I saw Josh Kirby. Was the game already somewhat developed, or were you like, I have a feeling about this, let me work through it? Or did you already have a game in play and you wanted to match the two? Like, tell me kind of that creativity that happens between you merge the game and the IP itself.
I would say definitely B. We saw a art, theme, and story behind it that we could use and leverage. And in some cases we thought, I mean, to be perfectly candid, in some cases I thought I had a prototype in mind and was way off. Because, you know, selfishly, I also, you know, am a game designer in my own mind, but there are way better designers out there. So ultimately, what we have gotten much more successful doing is looking for these unique IPs and then finding the right design and designer who can help us take this story and really leverage it. And Josh Kirby is probably a great example, because when we saw the art of Josh Kirby, and by the time we were done, I think we have about 80 unique pieces of art that we can use. And ballpark, and when these unique pieces of art, they're mural size. This is back before he was painting these things before computers. So we're talking, you know, huge panels that you can get a lot of detail in. So you know, another tip is if you can crop images out of your art, you get more cards. So so you know, looking at that art really for us defined, well, now when I go to proto spiels, unpubs, game pitches, I'm looking for something that matches this theme. And in this case, Jordan Nichols was the designer that we partnered with for The Lost Worlds of Josh Kirby, because he had basically kind of a planet exploration game. It had a cool dice action point, you know, mechanic, but it really, and it was card and panel driven, which means that it was art friendly. Fickle is very similar. Fickle, the designer, Glenn Cotter, had, when we saw that pitch at Gen Con some years ago at, you know, one of the mixers, right, the game mixers, and he had basically kind of a wizard spell casting game, and was, I mean, I feel good about this one because we watched other publishers pass on it, because I think they weren't really, they were looking at the game as is, as opposed to, well, what are the mechanics here that we could bring to a new theme? And a lot of the successful publishers, when they're looking at a design, are also trying to figure out what is the art that they can repurpose, what is the themes that they have in their IP library, that kind of stuff. So someday though, I'm going to make one from scratch and just have my name on it, and hasn't happened yet, I might add. So not a good game.
There is a game out there with your name on it, though, right?
Yeah, I've published a couple games too. So the Pocket General, World War II, is a two-player war game style board game. I kind of cut my teeth with Dubious Alliance and Lair of the Lich King, which was an IP. In this case, it was for a band of orcs, tusks up to the tribe. You know, so I have made some games, but I think as we mature the company and we get into larger, more specialty product, you know, everybody has a specialty, and there are very talented designers out there, and I feel good being the vessel to help them get their games made. And back to your original question, what I find to be exciting is then go to like a licensed expo and other locations where these brands exist, and I've played a whole bunch of prototypes. I'll tell you right now, I have played the prototype that needs to be Killer Clowns from Outer Space. Like, this guy made that game, you know, and if I can make that deal happen, that's, you know, it's going to be a great game, and it's going to be fun to, you know, have the bubblegum ray gun and, you know, the cotton candy ray gun and other stuff.
Does it just come down to like your ability to pitch in order to get all parties involved? Because like have you ever run into a developer who's like, no, this is going to be a wizard game and fairies are no?
Sorry, I just want to jump in and just, before you give the real answer.
Sure.
My answer is we like this game. We want to take the mechanics and publish, and you have a published game, or do you want to keep it to yourself? And I'd be like, I want a published game.
Yeah, no, you'd be surprised though. Actually, we have had that happen more than once, where we played something, we really liked it, but you know, one of our early decisions is, will we work with the designer? And sometimes the designer has a very passionate view of the theme and the story. Some designers are world building, and I'm happy to talk about world building as an IP strategy because there's real money in it. You know, and if you're working with a designer who they're trying to build a story and characters, and when I say world build, they want the next MCU, they want the next Star Wars, they want the next, you know, the fantasy world, right? That they're going to write content for. You know, in that case, that's not a good fit for us. There may be other publishers for them, because you know, back to trying to find a unique IP and marry it to a good quality prototype, right? Something that gamers will be proud to play. So for us, that's generally a no-go, but I will add that there's an exception, because when we signed Tater Freighter, I will be honest, we signed this game and I told the designer, and it has this fun, funky art style, and it just stands on its own. But when we signed it, it was with the intent in my mind to go retheme it. And then we took it to playtesting. We took it out in public, to shows, took it to a local pub, that kind of stuff. And over and over and over again, it was 2 thumbs up. People liked the theme, the silliness of Tater Freighter, special snow cone. Everybody loved arguing over it. And by the time we had tested the game, I'm testing it to see, are they good mechanics, and and because I'm gonna slap killer clowns on it or something silly. By the time we were done, we came to the conclusion this game just needs to be made as is. This game is done. And so they do happen. I'm not gonna, if you're a publisher and if you're a designer and your game, your art, your theme, and your story is like ready to roll, there are publishers that will benefit from having a completed product, right? And there's still work for them to do. Don't get me wrong, but I would say that's all. My guess is that's the exception to the rule, right? Because art is expensive. The ability to control the theme. If you're the designer and you sign the game over, you're probably not going to be invited to the all of the creative processes, and definitely into decisions that drive cost, right? If you envisioned giant-sized cards so that all your art, and they're reducing it to poker-sized cards because it's a $2.50 difference, then that can hurt, right? I mean, just emotionally, because
that actually just brings up a good question, is that when we talk to other game designers, some of them have a lot of business experience, so they're just like, I know how much cost is to a card, I know how many words I can get on a card when they design. Was that kind of the same with Tater Freighter? Was the designer experienced, inexperienced? How flexible were they? Were they like, here's my game, fix it if it needs to be fixed?
Luckily, Sam was very flexible. Again, we signed it and we were very transparent, that we intended to retheme it. Not that we didn't like, we liked the style. It was very eye-catching, but we had a different purpose in mind. So in that case, it ended up being that he was very flexible, and lucky him, the work that he and Alice, the person that had done all the great graphic work prior to meeting us, to just put together a really quality presentation, right, for an easy, fun, kind of small footprint game. But in other cases where we have sat through several product pitches where the designer had a very specific story, theme, and in some cases had spent money on the art, right? And and I understand, right, they want to sell the game and get some reimbursement for their initial but the reality of it is, the publisher's costs are very different, right? Let's put aside the physical cost of the product, developer time, marketing time, platform, e-commerce now, logistics, factory, promos and cons, conventions are almost break even, unless you really do large volumes. So there's all these other costs that, in fairness, if the designer is only thinking Kickstarter, then that's one and done. Right. And if the publisher is thinking mass market and trying to get a big retail, what they're trying to do is figure out how to not only make the game, but then sustain the product over time. So to answer your question, I do think the perception of what the real costs are very different when you move from kind of an indie self-publisher on Kickstarter, which I've done, right, with Lair the Lich King as an example, to a publisher who is taking your game and has a vision for retail and distribution, which I've also done as a designer, because Pocket General is actually published by Pacific Rim Publishing. So that game I did, I'm a designer in that case, right? And they signed my game, and, the costs for because war games do well in Europe and more globally, but a very niche market, that meant that their vision, Jeff at Pacific Rim Publishing, was very different than what I might have done if I was just Kickstarter focused.
As a developer, when you go to them and you're talking about this entire publishing, campaign, is it in some respects like likened to if you make music, do you get royalties? Like, kind of what is the difference? Because like a lot of people can understand, it's like it cost me X amount to ship, to make, to do a Kickstarter, so I need to, you know what I mean? You can pretty easily map those costs. But as a designer, when you're getting into the world of marketing, those are insane costs that most people don't understand how much it is to actually, run a campaign on Facebook, or, do other ads, or, go places, because you're talking about conventions and you have to get it down to the point where it's like, I need a place to stay and I need to put in a hotel, and they don't think about those aspects. So when you go back to them and say, I would like to, and I know this is a really long-winded question, but like, I'd like to take your game and distribute it, nationally, internationally. So you're going to have to give me X, or you can only get X. Like, what is the deal? What is the deal that you basically like typically set forth with, with a developer?
With a designer, yeah.
Designer, sorry.
So typically we have a designer royalty, and royalties. And I'll tell you, you could do a little bit of research and you'll see all kinds of advice on, what's a fair amount and how much royalty. I can tell you our approach is we have a scaled royalty, because, the first couple thousand units is break even, right? I mean, well, the first 1,000 units is almost a loss, right? Is barely break even. After that, you start moving into break even for the product, not the company, right? That's not paying me a wage. That's just getting the product, like the cost of the marketing and the cost of running the campaign. So what we do is our royalty increases as we hit sales points. And then generally there is a modest initial royalty grant, right? So there is money in the beginning. But honestly, if your goal is to become a full-time designer where you're living off of the royalties of your work, that is a very, very challenging place to be. Or games are, to be perfectly candid, you would make way more money doing the same thing, designing like candles, paper plates, anything that's general merchandise in a retail store, because board games are very, very complex. Think about it. Like, it's a box with an engineered set of specs called a rule book with a whole bunch of plastic and wood and components and inserts, and I got to figure out how to make the thing work. With a customer base who is sometimes loud, sometimes unforgiving, and is highly discretionary, right? And, it kind of, ultimately the publisher, the designer, everybody has to be doing it as much for the love, right? And the community, as opposed to, and then if you do well, right, then, or if you're well funded, then you can do great. And the other reason to have that level of emotional commitment is a really good, successful product also takes a long time to build, right? You're going to be working on that. If you're the designer my term for it, and sounds kind of negative, but the design and dump designers, right? Here's this thing, here you go, I want my check. I have no emotional commitment or ongoing support of it. We don't work with them. And the reason for that is, the game will get better as art and play test and the Kickstarter, right? The Kickstarter community wants to hear from the designer. Yeah. And, ultimately that partnership, is almost I would argue that the partnership is as, if not more important than the money, because when you really look at the amount of money on the table for even a successful Kickstarter, think of a board game. I won't go into big minis, monsters, and Gloomhaven. There's outliers. If you look at your typical, $80,000 to $200,000 Kickstarter, right, which is considered a successful Kickstarter. 40% of those proceeds are going to go to shipping. About 20-30% is going to go to marketing. Right, you've got if you've done your math right, you've tried to keep the cost of the game under 20, the physical costs of manufacturing under 20%, 1/5, right, or the 1/5 or 1/6 if you're really talented. And I'd say that's going the other way. Costs have gone up in the last 5 years, so now people are trying to keep it from 20 to 25%, and we're talking at volume, right? Once you hit 100,000 units, it's a totally different game. But that's not your typical Kickstarter trying to get a game made to Kickstarter is also about making a game to prove it to the market because you're trying to go pitch it to a big box.
Yep.
Right. And so with that math in mind, really there's less and less left to pay people to go to conventions, to buy all that cool art. And, so the royalty can feel really tight. I'd say a typical is low end is 2%, high end is 6 to 8%. Anything north of 10 is generally because your name makes sales, right? There are designers whose name guarantees sales. You would definitely want to pay more for those because it goes right back to an IP. A name is also an intellectual property. If if you're one of the recognized names, and I won't name drop for fear I owe them something. If you're, one of the big names in board games, you already have a following, and that's one more reason to work and pay more for that designer. Yeah. Hopefully that answered your question. It's a little evasive because there's no exact number.
Yeah.
I would say this though, if you're a designer and you're trying to negotiate that, one, you can both negotiate a royalty. In other words, here's a percentage of sales, and then also negotiate working on the game, get paid separately, a fixed rate, or, to actually do development work or to write the rules. And we do that pretty regularly because, because it's a fixed cost and we could plan for it. Right. And if you're talented and know how to do those things, then even better. And I think that really as a designer, I think the better approach is get some points. For sure, right? If you luck out and hit a home run, you're going to want that percentage of sales.
Yep.
But it's much easier to then negotiate, art if you're an artist, or doing prototype and content writing. If particularly if it's a storybook driven kind of game, as an example. So.
Okay.
Lots of ways to do it. I mean, and it's very much a negotiation skill. That's, I think, why it might feel mysterious. There's not like an easy fit answer because it also, there's other variables, right? Size of the game, distribution, what market are you distributing it? Other products, right? It could just kind of get out of control really quick.
No, it totally makes sense. It, and again, too, because my experience is in film and television, that's very similar to, film and TV as well. You talk about points on the back end is essentially, it's like I get a day rate for showing up and doing X and Y and Z, but then I get points on the back end to compensate for, maybe taking a cut in pay, or, you know what I mean?
Just, is it based on but your percentage ideal is based on units and not on revenue?
We do ours on revenue.
Okay.
But we do revenue by category because the revenue and margin can be different. So card seats and playmats might pay different, right? And and one of the reasons to do that is at some point the publisher has to make money, or there will be no more new games, right? So we might be more comfortable giving points on the board game, but the playmat is such great margin that we might be tighter on that royalty piece. And there's less work. I mean, there's not a lot of development work, right, that goes into an accessory like a playmat, right, other than the graphic. So hopefully, so it kind of that's how we approach it anyway.
I think about Hollywood accounting and the fact that big movies, blockbuster movies are still millions of dollars in debt, and the writer is not seeing anything.
Right. Yeah. Well, and it's in fairness, I think that board games are similar. The scale is different. We're not talking millions, we're talking tens of thousands. But right out of the gate, building a board game is it's a very capital intensive activity, right? There's a lot of build up costs to get to the Kickstarter, and there's shortcuts and smart ways, and one of the reasons we are really interested in unique IPs is we kind of curtail the art development cost because we leverage existing art, right? And to your point, we pay it later in the form of points. But despite cost mitigations, you still have development. You still have to everything from building the prototype to play testing. And it also becomes a quality decision too. I will say that there are plenty of games that get low play testing, low development, modest art, and they get made. But that almost becomes volume because you're trying to run more Kickstarters or maintain your pipeline with your distribution deals. Where we've made a decision to be a little bit more specialty, higher quality, a little bit longer lead time, because we do feel like if we can be a brand that you trust because the game is good, the quality is there, we can wait a little bit longer for the next thing because we should be able to get you back.
So I have a question. It kind of comes back to the marrying of everybody. You talked about, you went to Alien Con, or, you know what I mean? You just kind of reach out to these brands, but like for a developer, a board game developer, designer. Why do I always say developer? For a board game designer, where do they meet people like you? Where do they meet, you know what I mean? So if somebody's like, I have this great idea, I would like to, I'm in the process of making my board game. I have everything. I've got a prototype or whatever. Where do they go to meet other people? You know what I mean? How does that process work for them?
Yeah, there's actually a couple venues. And with IPs, I'll set that aside for a minute because there are also shows, right? Conventions and shows are a great way, particularly if you want to get into, film IPs. Or book and magazine. So the International License Expo, Chicago and New York Toy Fair. So, but we'll set those aside because they're kind of very specific to much larger deals. Designers, but if that's in your neighborhood, on the other hand, you should go, right? Because this is, it's a self-promotion and a negotiation skill to really take your product or your concept to somebody that's interested. Because board games are so complex, on the other hand, really, I would say that, like, in no particular order, proto-spiels and unpubs are important because you'll network and meet other designers who are published or working on product. And, sometimes people get selfish with their knowledge. Then as the market is pretty, there was like 2,000 or 3,000 Kickstarters going on when we funded Josh Kirby. 2,000, 3,000. Right? Like, you have to network. You have to let everyone know. Stop being silly. There's plenty of money and people out there. They're not going to steal your work. They're not going to steal your idea. If anything, that's how you're going to wend through, the silliness that is, getting something creative made. So proto-spiels and unpubs are great. And some of them are better than others. I will say, like, I'm really bummed about our game castle in Mountain View. It used to be an excellent unpub. Publishers, board game publishers would fly in for this one because there was a lot of top drawer designers. I understand that they've closed that store. They're moving to a new location, so we're waiting for an update. And it's 2020, man. You just can't plan on anything. Yeah. So at conventions, game conventions, many of them now have the speed dating. And actually had this week I was on a conference call with Yanni Usula, who's the CEO of Dice. If you're familiar with dice.com, which it teaches you how to play board games via an app. And he was leading a great discussion on, like, how you teach a game. And, specifically when you do the speed dating thing, it's an excellent way to meet publishers. Publishers are going to speed dating because they are looking to sign something, right? They may not tell you what, they may not even exactly know why, they need it, or where it is in their calendar, but the only reason to go, as well as a little bit of practice, but the real reason is you're looking because the thing that you're building is underway, and you have to have the next, you got to have the next game in the pipeline. The trick with those is you have to be excellent at the 5-minute pitch. And I have sat through, and that's a topic for another day, but it's easy to flub that one, particularly if you're trying to pitch it as an IP. I've sat through several where it's great. They've done all this art. They've really pushed this theme, and they didn't hear me when I say, yeah, but I've got this comic book deal in the background that I'm trying to put on a board game. So I already can't work with you because you're basically telling me no. Right. So speed dating. The direct contact is Tabletop Simulator and Tabletopia ideally, by the way, solve some of that, because now you can invite people to go play your prototype. And it's fairly easy to do, to set up a virtual table of your prototype. And then I'd say the direct reach is, internet, social media, email, right? They're publishers depending on how big you're talking, Wizards of the Coast, Hasbro, you're talking armies of brand managers and lawyers, right? So that's a little harder. But, an independent small board game publisher, Facebook IM, contact them on their Gamma site. If you're not a Gamma member, if you join Gamma, they have like a backdoor portal where you can direct message other companies. So be a little bit forward. Yeah, for real. And it's very reasonable. I think that the non-publisher membership is like $70 annually. And if you do that route, have your sell sheet, have like, or better still, if you even have a playthrough video that they can watch, right? So then they can just go, they can go straight to, ooh, I'm interested, and set up a time and a date. Because if they are, they'll spend more time.
Okay, so besides just the playthrough, which is, obviously you have to have the 5-minute pitch, which is the who, what, when, where, why, why do I care is essentially what you're trying to convey in that couple of minutes. The basic game mechanics, because obviously, every publisher is like, let me understand what this game is and see if there are any holes in it immediately. But then what else do you look for, like on the one sheet? Like what other things are you probing for when you sit down and work, like look at a design, look at a game?
For fear that I share too much of our secret sauce, we have a very specific methodology when it comes to looking at designers. I've talked to others, I've shared some of this with others, but without all the details, for example, if you have a great game, well, I'm going to take a step back. There are so many great games right now that your great game isn't necessarily that exceptional, right? So it's more than just a great game, right? Does it fit the customer base of the company? Do you have some unique angle, right? Does it fit a niche that they have or are missing in their product line, right? And so keep that in mind when I say that, mechanics and all that stuff, that actually comes later. Because I would say when we look at a pitch and we go through a sell sheet and when we talk with designers, here's kind of our methodology.
That's interesting because you're honestly, you're asking. So I've also done sales. You're honestly asking the designer to be like, this is where my game is going to play the best. When I used to sell, I would be like, this is who you need to take my product to and go sell it to them. So I was exactly training the sellers to sell kind of thing. Like, this is what my product is, and you need to know where to put this in your arsenal. And if we didn't have that, if you don't need me today, you're going to need me one day. So here's my card. Like, that was kind of my pitch.
That is literally it too. Because if you're pitching me a crunchy Euro that's 7 hours and going to be $300 to make, full of miniatures, then you didn't do any homework on Bard Games. That is just that's not our target audience, right? So for us, what it boils down to is when I work with the designer, because that we've already kind of covered why. Will I play it 100 times? Think about that one for a second.
Yeah, wow. I was like, I don't have 100 times in my life to play something.
So as a publisher, we're going to have to play it, fix it, write the rules, promote it, take it to cons, sell it. We're going to play it 100 times. And we got to enjoy the 100th time as much as the first time.
That speaks to passion, because at 100 times, you're like, here's this game and I'm over it, versus like, here's why I believe in this game.
Think about how many games you own that you played 3 to 5 times, right? Yeah. And I would tell you 3 to 5 plays is actually very good. I think, and there are games that I love that I've played 3 to 5 times and I consider them like must keeps. But, realistically, that's different than what a publisher has to do. They, if they're really promoting it, then, there has to, can the game be played that many times and still be fun? So that's part of our test. And I'd say that's very different than what it means is that's where the Euro doesn't fit well, right? Because the time it takes and all that good stuff, I just won't do it, right? There are people who will. Will our customers love it? And this is another one that I think goes right into what you're saying as far as like qualifying the sale. Our customer is not, will Brandon Raasch love it? Brandon plays all kinds. I grew up playing role-playing games. I play Euros. Sometimes I even win them. I'm just a consumer of games, but that's different than what Bard Games is really about. Bard Games is 3 to 5 players, 12 minutes per player, casual game night. Boom. If it doesn't satisfy that customer, we won't sign it. And so what that does is allows us to look at other games. It's actually why, for example, we didn't publish my 2-player war game style board game that's about 60 minutes. It literally failed every test of my company's decision on what's a good game, right? Because every customer and every game player has a unique view of what they like. Some want immersion and some tolerate randomness, others it has to be strategic and complete control. And there's no wrongness there. It's just know your customer. And so for us, when we're back to kind of how we use that in pitches, is what we're looking for is, and particularly if you're listening to us describe the customer and say, hey, can this be a 3 to 5 player game? can you knock this down to a 15-minute play? What does it look like if you got rid of drafting and you went straight to shuffle, right? Silly example, but if you're a designer, you understood what I said.
Yep.
Right? Because drafting adds about 10 minutes, each round. You add 5 rounds to the game, you just added 50 minutes, right? 10 minutes of, particularly in the learning phase when people are trying to decide whether they love your game or not. So now I'll take it I'll put my designer hat on and kind of give the same answer. So you have to be able to help the publisher understand what makes this game unique, because all the games are great, but my game is unique because of X, right? And that's what your pitch should be. In 5 minutes, don't try to explain the whole damn game. And certainly don't make them simulate drafting, right? Just give them the cool cards and say, hey, you drafted successfully, this happened, but look, you just made this cool cascade, right? And all these things moved, and the interlocking puzzle that is my game unfolds, right? That 5-minute pitch should be, why is my game special? Who is my target player? And what can this game be? Right. So that's where you start getting into IP and themes, and how involved do I intend to be? Right. Because I think that also, back to your legal question, there's that round of getting all the it's not just legal, it's also project management, right? It's laying out all the work. And if your intent is to kind of leave it and let the designer have it, then that might be different than the person who desperately wants to learn. And we actually like the person that wants to be hands-on and learn the business and come behind, be a part of the team. They're in our Slack channel. They see us mess with their baby all day, and every once in a while, and we love it because they'll chime in and say, "Ooh, wait, that doesn't work because I've tried that." Right? Oh man, and that's the reason to have them there. But I'd say those, if I'm a designer putting together and maybe the last one is the components. But the components are negotiable, right? As I've already talked about, what you envision versus what the designer may choose to do. Sometimes don't agree.
This has been a great talk.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, to me, it's fascinating because there are so many similarities, just in business that, that if you don't make games, if you don't make movies, if you don't, if you haven't created and taken something to market, I think it's a real sort of just fundamental understanding, so thank you for that. Because, I think people kind of don't get, what the sauce is that, all the ingredients that goes into that sauce back there.
And it's pretty abstract. It's not like the physical part of making the game, right? When you talk about art and legal deals and royalties, right? You kind of get into a lot of agreement, and that's where a little bit homework pays off. Certainly, I would invite anybody to check out the License Expo, right? They're kind of the gold standard for where licenses begin. And then my last challenge to designers is, decide early whether you're making a game or world building. Right? Because if you're making a game, then it's okay to let your publisher find some cool theme. Right? Because if your game is the next Harry Potter, whatever, then you're set, man. Harry Potter's going to sell, and you'll probably be invited to make more games.
Yep.
Right? And maybe that wasn't what you intended, but it's it's fine. You'll still have fun. You'll get to go to Comic-Con. It'll be great. So, but if you're world building, if you have a vision of character and story and theme, then just be aware you're probably an independent. You're probably on your own a little bit, and that's fine. Because there's some really successful, what's the Mice and Mystics? It's head to a movie, right? Am I wrong?
Yeah. Well.
And so you just never know, which ones will really grow into, a full blown world that you've created. Just have a sense early on of where you're at, so that when you're having that discussion with people, it's with the right people, the publisher, attorneys, if they get involved. You know where your boundaries are.
Oh, that's perfect. If people want to get in touch with you, what is the best way to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So our website is bardgames.fun. That's bard as in games. So bardgames.fun. And sometimes every once in a while people think it's bar games, which I wish I'd have grabbed that.
I was about to say, it's possible. I mean,
wish I'd have grabbed that URL first. Don't get me wrong.
Bard games.
Yes, Bard Games. So, but it's so bardgames.fun is one way to reach us. We have a contact. You can also do info@bardgames.fun, and that comes straight to us. That's and then Facebook. We have a active. We're pretty good about Facebook and Facebook IM, so that's a great way to reach out to.
Cool.
Perfect.
All right, you gonna wrap it up? Or how about we just say, thanks, Brandon?
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to see you both. And even if it's just virtual, we'll figure out how to play something.
We're going to play bar games, not board games, bar games. In
that
person,
I can still get involved in that too. I like it.
Yep, absolutely.
Nice. All right. Thank you. And we'll talk to you later. Mm-hmm. Well, that was an interview. Yeah, that's
actually, can we start this again? Because you're like, that was an interview. I was like, yeah, it was.
Go ahead.
Well, that was an interview. Sorry.
So that is going to wrap it up for this episode of the Untitled podcast.
Oh, man. I think we should have Brandon back on because we did have, after that conversation, I like how you're going to wrap this up. And then I was like, nope, no, we're not. Hold on. I got things to say, people.
It's like the Lord of the Rings endings.
Okay. Anyway. Never mind.
They had air conditioning in Lord of the Rings.
Okay. All right. You're right. We should just have Brandon on again in the future because we did talk for at least another hour after that conversation about production. And it was actually really fascinating because, again, he'd spent some time visiting China and visiting manufacturers in China and then just talking about cost effectiveness,
right?
Which manufacturers actually like the factory itself, what they do, how they do it, in order to develop cards and big prints and things like that. So it was actually really fascinating.
Mm-hmm. And we actually started talking about specific printers and who he uses, who he would recommend. And then I was like, we did some stuff with them and it was a little bit more pricey than I wanted it to be. And then I actually went home and ran the numbers. And the one that he recommended wasn't that much more expensive. But he also said that when you have a rep and are doing bulk orders, you actually get more discounts than what is on the website.
Which makes sense. I mean, that's kind of standard, I think, in general. I think that's not big news to everybody. But if you guys are interested in actually hearing about manufacturing in China and some of the nitty-gritty details about colors and prints and things like that, just let us know in the comments and we will get Brandon back on and maybe a few other people who've gone through that printing process and
we should
dive into it.
We should also reach out to somebody at Panda Game Manufacturing to do an interview.
Okay.
We happen to know somebody.
Anyway.
So that's going to wrap it up for this episode of the Untitled podcast.
For real this time.
Yep. Which is show. It's a show. It's not a podcast. Is it a podcast?
I don't know. Who listens? Nobody?
I almost thought you said who let the dogs out. So here...
We have to go let the dog out, excuse us.
Legitimately, in the comments below, let us know your thoughts about the title of this show. So, Untitled, I like it. I think it'll stay. But is it a podcast? Is it a show? What do you think? What do you think it should be?
It's a video podcast.
Oh, boy. It's a vodcast.
It's not that. That's a dumb word.
It is a dumb word. We also are in our Discord, which you could hit us up there as well. There's a channel specifically for the Untitled podcast.
Where pretty much everybody just quotes the dumb things that come out of my mouth. Oh, wait, that's most of Discord.